So I've had a pleasure to work with Purview for AI over the past year, a bit more than that. And it's been great seeing everything coming together. And this ChatGPT Enterprise integration that we've been working for a while, we have been running it in a private preview for more than 6 months at this point. So we've gathered a lot of great feedback with the help of both people using it in the private preview as well as people using it in the public preview. So I hope to be able to share more detail about how you can actually use it in your environment and also how it will behave when you're using it. So let's jump straight into it. So the huge benefit you get from integrating ChatGPT Enterprise with Purview is that you get the full power of actually existing investments you may have made, or sure, if you haven't made investments into Purview, you will get amazing new technologies that you can use to meet compliance requirements, controls that you can use to meet regulatory risks that you may be facing, security risks that you may be facing using AI. So if you look on this slide, you can see that on the left-hand side, we're highlighting that when you integrate ChatGPT Enterprise with Purview, you will actually get access to hunting capabilities. So in this screenshot, it's advanced hunting, but you can actually integrate this into any type of SIEM solution to do hunting on top of your ChatGPT data and the usage of your ChatGPT data. We also have the e-discovery and the DLM solutions where you can discover how data has been used. If you have a regulatory case where you actually need to get back AI data, you can do that using e-discovery. You can also apply data lifecycle management on top of that data to make sure that you only keep what you need to keep for your discovery purposes. We also have communication compliance and data loss prevention. Well, the big focus that we will have in this call will be on communication compliance and what that brings. Because if someone is behaving in a way that isn't expected, we can pick that up with things such as prompt shields, sensitive information types, and other detection mechanisms we have in communication compliance. And lastly, all of these controls, when we talk about security, are aggregated into insider risk management, meaning that you can get a kind of a unified view of the risks surrounding a user. It may be information risk. It may be security risks. It may be physical risks. All of that is aggregated into insider risk management. And now you also get that type of aggregation and that type of power even from your ChatGPT Enterprise usage. One of the key things to keep in mind when you look at this, that all the information that is submitted via ChatGPT Enterprise can now, when you integrate with Purview, be classified by utilizing the Purview classifiers, meaning that if you have made investments today with custom sensitive information types, as an example, into your DLP process, those sensitive information types can be used for detecting AI usage that is non-intended, etc. So operational investments you have made already may be transferred straight into the AI age. And we think this is a great opportunity for many organizations that you can actually take existing processes and use them together with your AI posture. So let's have a quick look at the integration itself. So of course, first you need to integrate with your enterprise workspace. So this is focused on ChatGPT Enterprise. So you need to first set up that connection to your ChatGPT Enterprise workspace to get this synchronization going. Once that is set up, you will start to see prompts and responses coming through. So they will show up in Activity Explorer. So when you look at DSPM for AI, you will start to see conversations with the prompts and responses coming up in DSPM for AI. And you will also see classification of those responses in many cases. Thirdly, once you now start to get this information into your Purview ecosystem, you can start to use e-discovery. You can start to use inside risk, communication compliance, and all the tools we just talked about on the last page. We have a blog post that you can use to set this up, where we have the step-by-steps. We will share that link as part of this presentation, so if you want to get more information. But let's go into some detail how this really works. So if you look up on the right-hand side here, you have OpenAI. This is a ChatGPT enterprise service where you have your existing workspace in ChatGPT. The way we do it is that you integrate with an OpenAI connector that we have as part of our data maps. I'll show you where it is and show you some tips and tricks around that one in the demo. That OpenAI connector is using the Purview API to push information into the Purview experience. So what really happens is that you may have conversations happening up here in your workspace. You have users communicating with your AI applications within ChatGPT Enterprise. We take those conversations through the connector. Then we map the user accounts you have in ChatGPT based on your connection with Entra. So we use the email addresses or UPN that you have as part of the connection in the Purview API, and we then store, so the prompts and responses are stored in the user mailboxes. So everything goes straight into the compliance boundary of Microsoft 365. So what really happens is that they're pulling the information from ChatGPT Enterprise to Workspace through the connector, mapping the accounts to the appropriate mailbox, and then store the information, the prompt response, in the mailbox. There are a few things to be aware of in this case, and that is that first you need to make sure that you're actually federated, so that you have the right federation in place between ChatGPT Enterprise and Entra, because otherwise you will not be able to make that connection. The second thing is that you also need to have the right permissions for the OpenAI connector, so that we can actually look up the email address and map it to the right type of mailbox ID, etc., to store the information in the user mailbox. The key vault that we have in the process, so I actually didn't talk about that one, but the key vault itself is there to make sure that you can keep the key to your ChatGPT Enterprise workspace safe. So you place your application key in the key vault to keep that one safe, and only the OpenAI connector is allowed to call the key vault to retrieve the key to then access the enterprise service itself. So that's also part of the whole architecture. Let me demo this and show you how this works. Before I show the actual data, let's have a quick look at the connector itself. So when you set up the connector, you actually start in the Azure portal, because that's where you create the key vault. That's where you set up the application permissions and all of those things. Once that is set up, you will register your application, and you will find in Purview and data maps, you will find that there is a ChatGPT Enterprise connector and a data source. So you register that data source as well. Once that data source is registered, you will be able to create new scans. When you create the first new scan, you will be able to select your credentials, and those will be the credentials you are taking out of the key vault, and then the type of collection you're making. We have all of these steps documented in the blog post. You will also be able to look at the scans themselves. So if you look at this one, for example, you can see all the scans that we have been running. So they run on a 50-minute basis in this case. And we can quickly look at all the scans that are happening across this environment. In some cases, you may encounter error messages or exceptions. So for example, in this sample, we had an exception yesterday as an example. What you may do in those cases is that you go and look at the exception. In the exception itself, you have a download log. If I download that log and look at the information, you will see the error message to why, for example, a scan is failing. In some cases, like in this one, you may see that this was because there was a UPN that is simply not within the Entra federation we have here, because that's a Microsoft address. So we know that is why this one is failing. We don't know how to map that user account into the right mailbox. So that's one of their messages you may see if the users are not correctly federated with your Entra instance. Overall, you will kind of see all this type of information coming through. You will see when they are in progress and when you have exceptions and all those things. There's not a whole lot of maintenance you need to do around this one. You just set it up and get it up and running. And if you have other connectors, you see in this case I have tons of them, but it's just like any other Purview connector that you're setting up. Set it up perfectly, and then it will run for you and make the scans. One thing to be aware of is that if you have a huge environment, a big one, and you're looking back when you run the first scan, so let's say you're looking back a few days, you can expect that one to take some time before it completes. So don't lose faith if it's taking a bit of time. Just wait for it, and it will complete. So that's all around the data map and the scan itself. The cool thing is what it then provides. So let's look at what we get out of the scan by looking at the STM for AI. And we can quickly look at the reports as an example. So as you can see here, we do see the trends over time for ChatGPT Enterprise. When we look at the reports, when we look at the policies, we don't care about the policies right now, but let's go and look at some of the prompts and responses. So this is what we talked about. You will see the prompt responses coming through as well. You will see the matching content. Like in this case, we had quite a few sits and other things missing. You can see I have some custom sits here too, meaning that even the custom sits are matching to my conversations. So I know what's going on. You can also look at the prompt responses like you can do for Copilot conversations. So if you want to look at the prompt response, you can get that data too. In this case, I actually don't have permissions for this environment, but that's another part. If you have the content viewer permissions, then you will be able to look at the prompts and responses as well. Another key aspect is when you start to get this information in here, we talked about e-discovery and how that is a key. Let's look at an e-discovery case that I have here. When you're running an e-discovery case, you have a specific type that is connected to ChatGPT Enterprise. You can see in this case, it's messages connected to AI app connector ChatGPT Enterprise. So this one is where you actually use the specific item class to map to the ChatGPT conversations. When I filter on this, you can see I only see the ChatGPT conversations and the sample here where you have see my threaded conversation. So you can start triaging your e-discovery cases based on ChatGPT messages. If we move on to the next part, which is more around communication compliance. I will actually switch to another one because we had some permissions things this morning. So this one is actually not in ChatGPT, but it gives you an idea of what's happening when you're using ChatGPT as well. This is an integration. It's ChatGPT underneath, and similar integrations. So when you have detections in ChatGPT Enterprise, they will start to show up like this. A key thing is that when you're setting up your policies, you can actually focus your communication compliance policies to only include your own ChatGPT Enterprise content, and not Copilot or other enterprise AI applications, by setting the sender address or recipient address to be mapped to your ChatGPT Enterprise address. So if we go back for how to identify your email address, sure, you can do it where we just were, but you can also go back to eDiscovery, look at the metadata, and in the metadata, you will find that your ChatGPT Enterprise app has its own email address. Can be used for these types of cases. So here you see the participant, and here you have the email address. So when you work through communication compliance and work through the enterprise AI apps, so to apply additional filtering to map it to your specific enterprise app, in this case, ChatGPT Enterprise, you provide that email address, and then you make sure that you're only getting that type of information into the communication compliance policy. This is especially important if you have many different AI applications that you're bringing into communication compliance. But I also promised to have a quick look at, okay, that's cool. We have this part where we are currently looking at the detection, where you have a prompt. The prompt contains some sensitive information. You may be thinking, well, I want to start with something else. I actually want to have this in my XDR or my CM and detect if something strange is happening in my system. So I prepared a sample here where we can have a quick look. So here you can see I've been running a query where I'm using connected AI app interactions. Connected AI app interactions is really enterprise applications. In this case, I'm using Cloud App Events. It's really connected to the unified audit logs. So if you have unified audit logs going into your CM solution, use the table where you're ingesting this data, and you will be able to make the same kind of query. So you can see in this case, it's a connected AI interaction that I'm capturing. I'm extending a bunch of attributes and expanding the messages themselves because I want to get to a specific point. So if you look at this one, for example, I can see that it's a negotiation app, but if I go all the way out, you can see IP locations and all that type of data has been submitted with this app. But you can also see that I have a sit list, and that sit list in this case is based on the communication compliance we just looked at. So you can see that these two events are actually these events, but we have the additional information about the context of the user. So what we could do in theory here is that you can use your XDR to alert on these ones in your main operation center, and then move into communication compliance from there. We can do it the other way around. You can start in communication compliance and do more broad hunting by entering your CM. And the cool thing is, as soon as you start to get information into hunting solutions, then you may enrich it as well. So what I've done here is I've prepared some additional things. So in this case, I'm actually joining this data with more data. So we know the department of the user, job title, and a few other things. If you now run this one, you can see that we are not only getting the first part where we talked about the sensitive information types, we're not only getting the detection, we're actually getting the context of the user itself as well. And this is where you start to get the power of how you can use the signals broadly. So it's not only ChatGPT Enterprise piece, sure, that's a key part of this, but you can get that holistic view of how the user is behaving, but also the organizational details around the user, also the risk level and other important parts that comes from your CM or your XDR side. So this integration, when you start to work on the ChatGPT Enterprise integration, it really provides so much more power than just being able to do e-discovery or looking at the prompt responses. It provides you to start operationalizing in your system today. And it really helps organizations to get value faster out of your solutions. Because if you don't have this type of monitoring in place, you will not be able to meet your security standards, you will not be able to meet your compliance and regulatory needs. So we think this is really some powerful things happening. So I promised to talk to this through the e-discovery, the communication compliance piece. We have also looked at how it works in Activity Explorer. We have looked at some of the reporting as well. If you go back to this one, you will have the reports, you will have recommendations being applied. As part of the reports, you will actually also have recommendations coming from our compliance manager. So if you have compliance manager requests, you will see those as well coming up. So if you want to discover and govern your AI apps, you will actually be able to start the communication or the whole compliance manager tasks as well to map to EU regulations or to NIST regulations, etc., or NIST frameworks, I should say, if you want to do that part. That's actually all I was going to cover. I did it in a good time. So now I'm open to answer any questions you may have. Let me take a look at the chat. So there's a question, is there any control to prevent a user using another company's ChatGPT Enterprise account? Well, that part will actually not work, because since you don't have the Entra connection, we will not be able to ingest that information into the system, because there is no way for us to map the account. So for those kind of cases, it will be quite hard. Sure, in theory you can do something, but it's really up to detecting how your this comes into another part of it, and that is to make sure that you actually capture the logging out of ChatGPT Enterprise as well, so that you can, like we just looked at the hunting piece for a user, you can also add and ingest ChatGPT Enterprise audit log data into your CM. So that's also to make sure that someone is not using your workspace and secrets in a bad way. So I think it really comes down to that type of detection. But from a generic standpoint, it shouldn't be possible, because you need to have that type of mapping in between, right? So you need both the right organization ID from Entra, you need the GUID of the user account, etc., to make that type of mapping.
Great. Let's see. We do have some other questions. Did you finish your presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a few. One is, how does this compare to Copilot? Does it complement with Copilot?
So in this case, we're actually providing the same type of capabilities we have in Copilot to ChatGPT Enterprise. So we really want to empower all AI solutions with Purview and make sure that you can get the same type of quick value like you can get for Copilot for ChatGPT Enterprise, so that you can meet the regulatory requirements. Because if you can't meet the regulatory requirements, you may end up getting stuck with so some regulatory issues you don't want to have that prevent you from realizing value. We really see Purview as a key to realize value when it comes to AI usage.
Great. The next question we have is, I assume this is very storage intensive. Do you have a storage requirements estimator?
The good thing in this case is that everything goes straight into the user mailboxes. So they really go into each and every mailbox, and we can already scale these mailboxes a lot. So if you have concerns, then let's have a separate talk. You can reach out to us, and we can have a look at that. But as you know, the user mailboxes we have in Exchange Online can really take a lot of storage, and right now we're not seeing any concerns. But if you have a user case that may go beyond what you have in Teams, Exchange, and everything else that you already put in there, that's great to hear, and let's see what we can do about it.
Great. The next question is, can I block prompts containing sensitive data from going out to ChatGPT servers?
You can do that, but that's more related to our browser controls. So when you are pasting the information into a browser, if you are using, so first, let's say if you're pasting information into a browser, we can use endpoint DLP to capture that and prevent that from being submitted. We are also having an upcoming private preview where we will in Edge allow, even if you're typing in the sensitive information and you're submitting the sensitive information using Edge, we will be able to capture that prompt before it reaches, for example, ChatGPT, if that is what you want to prevent. For many of the organizations we work with, ChatGPT Enterprise is a trusted boundary. It's part of their enterprise AI. So we haven't had a whole lot of that type of concern. But if it is a concern, then of course you should be looking at things as the browser control, where we can prevent that from being uploaded.
Great, thank you. The next question is, can we create a policy using DSPM for AI to monitor if or when a file is uploaded by user to ChatGPT?
That again comes back to the endpoint DLP control. And yes, with endpoint DLP, we can detect that. So you can get the information about the file being uploaded. And it's actually there by default. And you can use, if you create a policy that applies to your ChatGPT Enterprise endpoints, if someone is uploading using your browser, for example, we will be able to capture those types of actions. And you can do it based on labels, you can do it based on sensitive info types within the document, you can do it on document names, all the usual predicates that you have available in endpoint DLP.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is, what are some major points where customers are using this?
So of course, we can talk about the usual stuff, and that is always around making sure that people are not using it in an inappropriate way. Because in many cases, when you look at ChatGPT Enterprise, you may have very sensitive information that is used as grounding data. You may have research data and other information that is quite sensitive. So you don't want people to use that data in the incorrect way. It may be, unethical ways. It may be ways where they are trying to find more information about the underlying data that they shouldn't have access to. So all of those kind of oversharing type problems you may have. But it's also around regulatory usage that you all know about responsible AI and making sure that people are staying responsible when they are using these types of products. So when you have Purview in place, you can also capture that type of behavior in time. And it really helps you with the regulatory obligations as well.
Great. The next question we have is, can we access custom GPT configurations, including custom actions, prompts, files, and responses using this connector?
We are using the native API that is provided by ChatGPT Enterprise in this case, so OpenAI. So we're using the OpenAI API. So right now what we're doing is we are capturing the prompts and responses. But if you have a need to get more information, please file it. I think it's a great request. Because sure, you will get references to those files when you're using files. But if you want to get more detail in there, that's perfect. And we can speak to OpenAI how we can use the API better. Sounds good.
Great. Thank you. The next question is, during scans, does the connector only pull delta data or full data scan?
It pulls the delta data.
Great. The next question we have is, I have a ChatGPT sub. Does this work with all models and services?
As long as you have the workspace and you have access to the API for compliance in that OpenAI workspace, you should be good to go. So the requirement in this case is really that you have an enterprise subscription and you have enterprise workspaces. That's the requirement. If you have any other type of development tenant or other things, they will likely not work. But if you're talking about the enterprise, yes.
Great, thank you. The next question is, can I block ChatGPT, and if a user tries to use it, then redirect it to Copilot?
You can do that as well, but I think that's a different topic than this one. Yeah, sure, so what you do in that case, again, is that you capture it using MDA, and in MDA, you can give those types of advices. So you wouldn't be using the Purview product for those cases. It's much easier to use MDA because there you can provide referrals and other things to your Windows endpoints and Mac endpoints as well.
Great. The next question is, can we use this to detect and or block data matching a sensitivity label and or SITs from being sent to ChatGPT?
So this specific part that we just looked at, no. But again, endpoint DLP can do that part for you. So you can prevent sensitive files being uploaded or information being pasted into the browser from being uploaded. This is much more a regulatory tool to make sure that we identify how the tool is being used than an enforcement tool. But if you need enforcement, then the endpoint DLP part of it becomes better on enforcing the control to make sure that you cannot do certain things with sensitive data.
Great. The next question is, does it cover interactions on ChatGPT web, desktop app, and the mobile app?
It does. So whichever application you're using, it will capture the prompt responses.
Great. The next question we have is there a way to detect data poisoning and hallucination of an AI tool like ChatGPT through this new module?
We have the sensitive information type called Prompt Shield. That one will mainly focus on the typical type of attacks, but and I think it's always hard with the hallucinations of those pieces where it starts to do strange things. because it all depends on the grounding data and the data you have been using for it, and if it is doing something that is off. Of course, there are some known things, like if you use the trainable classifiers, if it's misbehaving, so when you start to talk about threats or other things, you can absolutely detect that part. It kind of depends. I would put the answer to that question. It's a great question, because yes, it can absolutely, with the trainable classifiers, start to identify if it becomes a bit skewed. But it's also, like I said, it also depends on the data type you're working on. So you may need to do something custom in some cases. But yeah, you can capture the prompts responses and look at these responses in this case.
Great. And then the last question we have is, can we apply data quality rules and governance on the ChatGPT Enterprise in Data Map and Unified Catalog?
Not right now. It's not stored, so we can access it that way in the catalog.
Great. Well, that seems to be all the questions we have. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Jon, for being our guest and for sharing the great information with our community. Also, thank you to the Q&A team who helped us with answering the questions and providing the resourceful information. To all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/security community. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. For those of you who may have additional questions on the topic we just covered or other product-related questions, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/Purview community. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.